Now I want to move into, some conversation around relationship, because we see resistance in all of this. And, one of the things that we have often talked about is, how do we have great relationships? How do we move forward within a relationship? And, like for us, 30 years later, we're still hanging out. We still are in love. We still have great arguments, great fights, but we always come back to center and know that we're good. Uh, in other relationships that we've seen break down, we've seen what's happened over especially the past 3 years. There's been lots of light shone on a number of things, because there's been a lot of resistance to uh, the divisiveness that has been created, at a social level, and certainly within a relational level, when we see all of the things that happen through the lockdowns. So let's talk a little bit about, how do we communicate with a significant other, and, I guess, without the resistance of change, or without having the resistance to them. In other words, I don't want them to be right. That would be maybe one approach to looking at it. How do we have these conversations? I think there's resistance in all of that I'm trying to kind of wrap my mind around and figure out how to communicate this conversation, because I think it's a really important conversation.
Oh, wow. I mean, I got light bulbs going off all over in my head when you say that. Is that when we have resistance to maybe having conversation, when we're polarized, or when we have an opposite opinion from somebody that we love and care about, we go into defense mode. And that's resistance. Defense mode is resistance. And to me, that's one of the hardest things to move past, is that defensive stance when you're trying to have a conversation with someone you care about, but that you completely disagree with. So one of the tools that I've learned to use, first of all, is to breathe and take 5 seconds, breathe, and not respond. Because the resistance is in me. If I'm hearing something that I don't like to hear, and I'm seeing it right now and hearing it and feeling it with family members, extended family, people outside, in the media, things that are happening out in the world, there's a lot that I'm resisting. There's a lot of change that I don't like, that I see coming down the pipe. But if I'm in a conversation with somebody and I don't want to, impale them with my opinion, I'll take a moment and just take a pause and breathe for 5 seconds. And one of the things that I've learned to say is, interesting. Tell me more. And that way I don't have to live into the resistance or being defensive. I can create the space so that maybe if I just hear what the other person's saying, I can drop my guard a little bit, be less resistant, be less defensive, less of a I don't have less of a guard up, I guess.
Well, let's face it. First off, to be in this level of relationship, or to bring your relationships to a next level, begins with awareness, right? We often get into heated debates, or people get into heated debates. They don't start there. It escalates. So the first awareness that we have to have is, okay, this is getting really heated, or I'm really starting to feel myself get pissed off, or I'm noticing that they're getting pissed off, so maybe they're not understanding. But that is heightened awareness, and that is the evolution of your own personal development. It's not about the other person at that point. So if you see that debate, that argument escalating, it didn't start there. It came down a runway, it started to ramp up, and then it was, poke the tagger, nudge, and all of a sudden, voices get louder, emotions get louder and harsher, and the next thing you know, we can find ourselves having conversations that we don't want to have, and then they get heated, and things get said, and it doesn't usually work out really well until you get through it. Now, how do we get through these? So how do we bring ourselves to a place of, okay, we want to be mature, we want to have a relationship that evolves and changes. One of the tips that I recently heard, and it was a great approach. You and I do that, but this was articulated, which is, talk to me like you love me. So in other words, when you're in that debate, and we've done this for years, which is what we haven't done, is we haven't never made things personal. Like, I've never called you names, you've never called me a name. We're debating, and we look at it from this point of view, which is, first and foremost, talk to me like you love me. In other words, it doesn't matter how heated it gets, how even elevated our voices may get. At the end of the day, it's not personal. We're not insulting each other. We're debating things perhaps in a heated way, but it's from a place of love always. Now, I don't know. Can you articulate that perhaps better?
No, I thought that's really well said. Like, fight with me like you love me. Have a conversation, disagree, but remember that you love me. So if that is added on to every single conversation, can you imagine just how much healing could be in the world? Even with family members, friends, if we just look at each other and remember who we are to each other instead of fighting over issues or
Yeah.
fighting at each other, we can look at the outcome. And that's what I really respect. And I don't know if you and I did this consciously, but when we have an argument and we're fighting, for example, which we do, and that was one of the questions, do you guys ever fight? We do. But we fight about the issue. We don't fight against each other because generally we're aligned on what we want the outcome to be and we're fighting for that. And maybe we're just taking different aspects of how to get there, but we're fighting for the same goal. And because we're very different human beings, we have different opinions on certain things, but we want the same outcomes. We want to be loved. We want to have kindness in our life. We want to have success. We want to make a contribution on the planet. And if we just use the distraction of resistance or the distraction of the argument, then we're not going to come to a common goal. And I think that's one thing that I've really learned over the years, learning how to fight with you, not against you, but to fight with you, is that we're fighting for something that's bigger than us. And if we trust that we always come from a place of friendship first and love and not taking the piss out of each other. We're not doing this to hurt each other. But if we're coming from it in the same regard as to an outcome, then I think that fight with me like you love me becomes a mantra.
Well, I think you said something really important there that we can't ignore and we don't want to minimize it or step over it, and which is we're not fighting to hurt each other. The problem is the problem, and that's where the heated debate may exist. But we don't take it to a level of making it personal and throwing insults and rolling our eyes and calling somebody stupid. Like, we don't ever go there. It's not even a thought process. As a matter of fact, I think sometimes when we get into our debates, our goal is to be the most intelligent person in the room. Therefore, we actually articulate as intelligently as we possibly can to actually debate the point. And it can get heated, there's no doubt about it, but it doesn't get insulting. So remember, it's the problem that is the problem, not the other person, not your partner. And there's a
Oh,
really good
whoa,
quote.
slow down, cowboy. Say that again. It's the problem that's the problem.
Yes. It's the problem that's the problem, not the partner. And some of you will go, yo, what if the partner's the problem? Okay, well, it's still, you have to look at the problem. I think the other approach that we have to look at with all of this is that, there's a great phrase, which is you can't win a battle without losing the war in a relationship. So in other words, the minute you go in that you have to be right, you have to win. And winning means that you're putting the other person down, you've lost. And this is so, so important. And vice versa, by the way. If you've got a partner that loves to win and loves to be right, and you walk away feeling like you've lost, that breaks down the relationship full stop. We have to really consider that, again, the problem is the problem. You can't win you can't win a battle without losing the war. Because when you look at what happens when you win those battles, because you need to be right, you need to make the other person wrong. You need to kick them while they're down. Man, that's just bad news all around. You got to be very, very careful with that.
And then why are you with that person then? Like, that's what I get to is like,
Well,
then why are you with this person?
this is okay. So first off, I don't think it's a case of this is about evolution of relationships. This is about growing and expanding and realizing that if you want to be in the relationship, you have to take responsibility for it. If you're spending a whole bunch of time trying to change the other person, stop it. Step back and go, what do I have to do differently? How do I have to show up? How do I have to be different? That will make life way easier than trying to change the other person. The evolution, the growth, the personal development, the awareness. I think it's not a case of, well, why are you even with that person? You may not even be evolved. At some point, you really love that person. And then you get emotional. And if you haven't done the work, if you haven't really looked at how you, in fact, have evolved as a person, matured, shifted your own thought processes, looked at how you view the world, yeah, then you're going to come up and hit that brick wall that says, well, I don't even know why I'm in this relationship. Well, it may be a good point, but ultimately take responsibility for it. That's just a kind of high level, my view of the world.
Not so high level. I think there's a lot in there, honey, that you really kind of highlighted. Is that if we link back to the initial part of this conversation, is resistance is futile, is that once we are in a situation where we're in a relationship and we have goals and we want to move our lives forward, and you're looking at your life partner as someone who is your adverse, what's that called, your adversary,
Mm-hmm.
then
Adversary.
that's what I'm talking about. Is that if I'm looking at you like my adversary, that's about me. Why would I then continue to be in a relationship with somebody that I hold as my adversary until you become my ally, until you become, when we're fighting for something, not against each other, then we don't have that ability to solve problems on a higher conscious level. And I think that's what this conversation is about for me, is that when you think of problem solving and not wanting to change, or resistance to hearing somebody else's opinion, even though for us we've been together over 30 years now, is that sometimes your opinions just piss me off.
Mm.
I don't I don't understand where you're coming from sometimes. But again, that's about me and my willingness to understand. Seek first to understand, then to be understood. And I think
Mm-hmm.
from a resistance conversation to a relational conversation, is that if we seek first to understand in the relationship, pause, take a breath, go, and I try to make all the right noises. Hmm, hmm, interesting. Tell me more. I mean, I don't mean to be facetious or sarcastic, but that allows me to pause and to get out of the charge of my body and get out of that resistance to, well, maybe he does have something that I need to learn, but no, I know everything. So that pause gives me that space, and I take responsibility for creating that space. I think we've learned how to fight really, really well over the last few years.
You're much better at it than me. So there's something to consider here, and there's something we get into these heated debates, and I think these are good kind of mindset based thought processes, which is, if your partner says that you hurt them, it's not up to you to say, no, you didn't. It's not up to you to
No, I
decide that you
didn't.
didn't hurt them. If
Yeah.
that's the language they use, then you have to really take a look at that. It's not up to you to say you didn't. You have to respect that and acknowledge it and then do something about it. Like an apology would be really helpful at that point. So, something to consider. The other thing that I want to bring up is, in all of this, is something that you do so well, and I can't speak for women. This is maybe what you can do. I can speak a little bit more for on the man side of it. You know, what I think most husbands or significant others, men, I'll start with most men, is they want to know that they're good enough in the eyes of their significant other. So, in other words, if you get into these heated debates and you start beating your man down, like if you have just got to be right and making them wrong, and you start getting really critical, you start getting really negative, you are literally shutting them down. Men just need their significant others to know that they believe that the husband, the significant other, is in fact capable, competent, can look after them, can look after their family. That is a male thing. And I think that it's helpful for women to know you do a brilliant job of it. You pump my tires at the right times. You believe in me, and I know you believe me. I know that you just aren't, saying it. And so that, in fact, gives me a lot more confidence. And I see and I believe, I don't know if it's true. I know it anecdotally with some clients, and I believe that it's so important to make sure that in the case of a man, that you as the significant other is letting them know that they're doing a great job.
Whew.
Any comments on that?
Yeah, I think I have friends, I have clients, I have women that I know that need to hear that. They need to hear that, because there's just times when you piss me off so bad that I feel my natural instinct would be to say something mean or negative or whatever, but that's not true because it's not how I feel. So I don't give myself over to that ego reaction. And thanks for saying that, because I do believe in you and I always seen your brilliance. And sometimes to the point of irritation for you. You're like, you can't see my brilliance because I'm not brilliant. And then I'm fighting to tell you how brilliant you are. And I'm like, what am I doing?
Okay, it's not quite like that, but
Yeah, it's
thank
kind of
you.
like that. It has been like that in the past where you didn't believe and I had to believe for you.
Mhm.
But I do. I strongly believe, and I think that I want the people around me to know how strongly I believe in them, or I wouldn't be investing in the relationship. I'm way too arrogant. I think way too highly of myself to surround myself with people that don't see their brilliance.
Well, you make a really good point right there. And as much as I made it about men, I think that you just made a really good point, which is something that I think we can all give some thought to, which is, are we making sure that the people around us, we are letting them know that we believe in them? Just a little bit of food for thought. That's where confidence is born. That's where relationships are growing. And it's easy to look at the negative side of things. Okay. So the resistance is that, oh, I don't want to tell them that because then they'll be full of themselves or then I won't get as much work out of them. Who knows? But let's just make sure that in the resistance conversation, if you're saying, well, no, I'm not pumping their tires, they don't deserve it. They still don't pick up their socks or take out the garbage or whatever the story is. Just be careful and look at where that resistance is. And it won't be about them. It will definitely be about you.